Hi, my name's Dale Adams of Planning Ahead of Time, and on this week's Pat Chat, I'm speaking with Evie King. Evie, you and I, we didn't quite meet because I actually saw you speaking at Lifting the Lid Festival and then got in touch with you because I was so interested in what you do and what you've got to say. So, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Evie King, or rather, that's my pen name. I work as a council funeral officer, a job not many people are aware even exists. Basically, we come into play when a funeral is not being arranged or not likely to be arranged. And when you actually start thinking about it, you realize there are lots of permutations where that would actually happen. Not everyone's a 2.4 children family.
Mm.
People become estranged, they outlive, they're very much solitary while they live. They can become outcast. They can do things that outrage people and that no one wants anything to do with them. And they can also end up unidentified and unclaimed in that respect. But also, there's a large portion of people who come to us because of lack of funds as well, which is obviously becoming much more of a common theme. So we are
Yeah.
there under Section 46 of the Public Health Act to arrange something to make sure that those people are taken care of and don't fall through the cracks.
Well, I had never heard of it. I was unaware that this was was a role, if you like, until listening to you at Lifting the Lid, and it was fascinating, heart-wrenching, and emotional, sort of all in one, really. But equally humbling that somebody actually takes on that role and makes sure that they are sort of honoured it with their funeral. So, can you give us a few sort of scenarios and maybe things that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is exactly why I wrote the book to get those stories across. Because a lot of the time, when I tell people what I do, their initial instinct is to say, "Oh, how sad, how tragic, how terrible," and sort of to pity the people.
Mm.
But we are all one or two bereavements away from being those people. You don't know in what order your family are going to die. We'd like to think there's a natural order. We talk about a natural order, but you're on a rock in space. There is no natural order. You are a bus or a disease away from death. You're a fragile body in a world full of
Yeah.
threat. So it's great that you're alive and you're still here, but it's not guaranteed. And so I wanted to shift that 3 a.m. fear that they represent to everybody about, I don't want to do that. I don't want to die alone, to don't worry about it. They lived a life. It was just happenstance and
Yes.
they will be sorted out as you would be sorted out. So just concentrate on your life because that's the only bit you're around for and you're aware of. And so some of the stories I chose were the ones that really touched me. My favorite was of a chap who lived alone and he had only one armchair in his living room. And it wasn't because he was poor. It was a really nice house and it was a lovely setup. The chair, the only chair, was surrounded by books, magazines either side, by a fireside, telly in front, electric guitar next to the telly, music system over there. And he had a great, rich internal life, but he didn't have anyone around him. And when I eventually Googled his name and his town, because that usually gets a footprint of somebody if they've been there a long time, he was coming up as an award-winning gardener and a member of a
Oh.
gardening club. So I found them, and it all sort of came out that he didn't like speaking to people, didn't like people around him making a noise. His family had all been deaf and non-verbal, except for him. He could speak, he could hear, but he lived in that world and he preferred quiet. And he found people quite disruptive and annoying, but he still liked people. He's still very kind. So everyone, even though they hadn't really spoken to him more than 10 minutes in the whole years they'd known him, loved him. And they watered his flowers on his allotment every day of the heat wave in which he died, and then bunched them and made them into a lovely coffin spray for his coffin. So just these kind of
Mm.
stories where you don't have to have a widow and a crying child to say you mattered. You can hit a lot of people's lives, and you can matter to a lot of people. So nobody lets anyone go alone is basically the theme, really. Even unidentified bodies. I had 105 people at an unidentified person's funeral.
Did you really?
Yeah, because more so, the unidentified, they're like the rock stars of the dead world. People want to come out for them. The unknown soldier who has a statue to
Yeah.
him. We have this feeling of projecting on them, the feeling of, oh my goodness, being forgotten, my worst fear. the tyranny of legacy dogging us our whole life, always worrying about racking up achievements for a eulogy we'll be too dead to hear. But the idea is that
Brilliant.
be me, this could be my mum, this could be my friend,
Yeah.
so that everyone will come out for those people and stand with them. And we just always like to complete things with a ritual, don't we? And I was in
Yes, we do.
Anglesey, yeah, 2 weeks ago, Anglesey, I was in a prehistoric burial chamber thinking, well, even before language, we knew we had to do a thing to mark it. So it's the importance of that saying goodbye, however you do it. It doesn't have to be traditional, but however you do it.
It's just incredible, isn't it? And as you say, I think we automatically relate. So, as you say, we relate to somebody else and wonder what would we feel like? How would we feel if that was a family member of ours and they were on their own? But as you say, you don't know the order. And I mean, you came out with a comment before we came on, um, about us and being corpses, and you think I'll let you say it in a moment, but it's true, really. You just simply don't know how it's going to go, who's going to go, and what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
And you're right, we're not here to see it, although I'm very much in belief of spirit and I work as a psychic medium. So to me that we often are there, but we're watching it in spirit. And what I really love is the fact that people who are dying physically alone, they can see and know as a spiritual being that they are still being taken care of and that people are showing up for them. I mean, that's lovely about them with the flowers from the allotment. These things are what are so important, aren't they? Just the touches that make it unique and personal to that person, regardless of having somebody arranging that for them. There's people there for them anyway.
Well, you say about the spirit, I am very much sort of a non-believer, but I always still find myself when I'm in a house search because we go into people's properties to try and find next of kin and clues and wills and wishes. And I will treat it as though they're watching me
Mm.
because, and I do the training now for the funerals, the council funerals. And in my training, I always talk about the dignity and the respect of the deceased in their property. So you may see things that are, in life would amuse you. And as we were talking about before we came on, you can be amused because death doesn't make us untouchable. We're still a person. And on the other side of the veil, we're all future corpses. So we can very much laugh about death because we'll be dead too. It's a universal. So you can still joke about. And when I went into someone's house and there were some funny details, I went, "Oh, I see you like Amanda Holden then." I talk to him as though he's there. That's what I'd say to him. Look, were I there? I'm not mocking him. He'd cut out pictures of her from like the magazines and put her above every light switch. And I thought that was so sweet, but so funny. And I'm
Yeah.
allowed to find it funny as a human. And I'm sure he'd laugh with me and say, "Oh, yes, I know, I know." But yeah, just treating them as though they're watching you. And I've even addressed one person because the neighbor saw me outside having a bit of a breath of fresh air and a gulp of water. And I said, "I can't find his will. I know it's in there." And she said, "Well, good luck with that." And I went back in. And basically, when his wife died, he was in hog heaven, not because she died. He was very sad about that, but he loved model railways. So he moved
Oh,
all of their furniture to one side of the room and made a giant model railway layout with his newfound, own space.
wow, that's
And
fantastic.
but he had put his will in the cupboard behind all of the furniture that he'd ever owned. So I was climbing through, moving chairs, passing them to my colleague. And when I got to the back, I just opened that cupboard when the neighbor came in with her sister and she said, "My sister's psychic and she's got a message for you. He's really annoyed that you can't find something." And I said, "Right, well, here it is." And can I just say, he should not be annoyed because he hid it behind all of his furniture. So it's just sort of still treating them as though they're still there and joking with them and, saying what you'd
Yeah.
say to them if they were alive because they are so alive for the
Mm.
duration of the case. The whole thing is about finding them, who they were, who they knew, what we should say about them at their funeral, what music we should play. So I don't think of them as dead until that I see them at the funeral and that
Mm.
closes the door on it.
Yeah. Well, I can remember once hearing it referred to as a pauper's funeral, and I
Oh,
know and that is very disrespectful. And
yes.
obviously, you have said there is an element of people who maybe can't afford it, but even so, I
They're
don't
not
think we should
important.
be judged. I don't
Yeah.
think people should be judged in that way anyway, because we all come here with nothing. We go out with nothing. It's all an energy exchange within this life, this physical lifetime. Um, but what's your view on that as a comment?
My advice in my training, my first slide basically has the legislation we work under, which is woefully short. It's about 4 lines long. And then the definitions. So I've got a list of things you can and should call them: council funerals, assisted funerals, council assisted funerals, Section 46 funerals, welfare funerals, public health funerals, but never paupers. There was one person who was on the course of my predecessor whose job title was the Destitute Death Officer, which
Oh,
sounds like a super villain.
it does, doesn't
I'm
it?
here to take you to the other side. Like, no, please, please, destitute death officer, leave me alone. And I say in my training, your job title should reflect, first of all, it shouldn't be anything you wouldn't want a relative to see in your signature, your e-signature. But secondly, it should reflect what you're doing, not whom you're doing it to. Because A, you don't know whom you're doing it to. It can be
No.
anyone. And you shouldn't use any words that are descriptive or judgmental of whomever that might be, because A, they might not be there because of lack of funds. They could have 15.1 million in the bank, like I've
Absolutely.
experienced.
Yeah.
But also, even if they don't have money, doesn't make them a pauper in those air quotes. That's a very loaded word. And
Mm,
even no money funerals wouldn't work for me because it's just not relevant. The reason
mm,
is not relevant. They're here because arrangements are not being made. That is all the law says. So our side should be we are arranging them under Section 46 as a council, as a welfare offering,
yeah.
as a council assisted. It should always be about what we're doing and not about the person who is expected to be at the other end of the service because you don't know anything about them and they're all unique individuals.
Mm. Well, that's why I wanted to bring it up because, again, I think the way you're talking and what you're educating people on is actually there are a lot of different circumstances that
Yeah.
can lead to this a council funeral.
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware of them
Mhm.
until I saw you speak. And I just thought, crikey, actually, absolutely anybody can
Yes.
end up with this scenario. And I think that's the importance, isn't it? And
Mhm.
as you say, you've written a book about it called Ashes to Admin. So, what made you write the book?
Well, as you were just saying, anyone, I myself say in the book, it'll probably be me who needs one of these as well, because I don't have any children. So
Yeah,
I'm a prime candidate. I don't have a natural person behind me to do such an expensive thing. You can have people that love you, but they're not going to be able to do the 4 grand sort of whole business for you. And that's what I wanted to say is I relate to those people too, because I'm in waiting to possibly be them. And I always make a joke at work going, who's going to do the funeral? Probably Muggins here. But it's just deliberately cheesy jokes. But yeah, the reason I wrote it was to introduce the different stories, the different circumstances that can lead you, the trajectories, and they're not sort of specific strains of character unless they are brought about by, I mean, let's get the bad one out the way. If you've got someone who's been a convicted paedophile, most
mm,
people won't want anything to do with them. There needs to be someone who neutrally and, straightforwardly just deals with them. And
yes,
to be honest, they probably had something bad happen to them in their life. So no one's born evil. They will have had a terrible beginning, and we just have to neutrally and peacefully settle their life down and do what no one else will do, which is why I was very quick to correct a journalist who said that our funeral for the unidentified person, where 105 people came, was crowdfunded by those people. Because while that sounds like a lovely story, it
mm,
really isn't because those people don't have the time and inclination to deal with every single person, from the ordinary person in the street to the outcast person that no one wants to touch. And they don't have the resources either. So you need this neutral council service.
yes,
We've had people who are 99 and have just outlived everyone they've ever known. And you lose a bit of the beginning of their life. You don't quite know what they did, but you piece together what you can and you make the best of it for their eulogy. We leaned with this 99-year-old, we leaned on her poetry from her later years, where she wrote poems about her knickers, and her best friend with dementia, who wrote poems about her imaginary chickens. So you just do what you can with what you've got. And then with other people, they'll have people still living who aren't maybe close to them. They're club members. We had the model railway club for the model railway man. We had the gardening club for the gardening man. You have hairdressers. You have people you don't realize you've reached and
Yes.
want to come out and sit there with you. You have carers from several care homes, from several iterations of people's care system journey will come to the funeral with flowers and stories and all sorts of things. Um, and I wanted to just show that you can outlive, you can become estranged, and that there's all sorts of estrangement. It's not just if you walk out that door, don't you dare come back. It's mental health challenges. I had people in my care who had not spoken to the family for over 10 years, not because their family didn't love them, but because they had voices in their head that kept making them drive off and leave town, and they didn't know where they'd gone. And eventually they drove off and left town and died in a car park in my district. And when you find that family, they're really devastated, doubly devastated because they didn't have the relationship they wanted and they've lost.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you have these complicated estrangements and you can't assume anything. I got given a phone number of an ex-husband of 16 years, and I got given a phone number of a wife of 50 years standing. You'd think that one would be upset, the 50 years standing. No, they hated him. But the person who'd been divorced for 16 years, who probably had a lot of regrets, was devastated because he'd started visiting her again in hospital when she was sick, and they'd fallen in love again and wanted to get back together, and then she died. So estrangement isn't about hating, it's about losing and drifting out of each other's lives and all of the things that can pull you apart. Someone had a terrible brain injury. He went from being a gentle soul to having massive rages. There are all these things that can happen to you.
Yeah.
You can have a long marriage and then someone gets dementia and forgets you exist and then can't do your funeral. So all of these things, just to tell people the range, the absolute massive range of things that can occur, but aren't the worst thing that will ever happen to you, because there are lots of people around you who will come out and be
Yeah.
there for you.
Yeah. It's just fascinating, I have to say, listening to you speak. I haven't got the book, but I have to say, after just having literally only 10 minutes so far conversation with you, I'm compelled to go and get it because I think it must make for absolutely fascinating reading to
I do
just
hope so.
hear of the stories that you've got. Because the other thing, when I was doing a little bit of research on you, is to see you on the front page of Chat magazine with a headline, I rummaged through dead people's drawers.
Yes, I didn't know I did that.
Yes.
That was a
Well,
revelation.
you think in instantly that makes you very interesting. It's like, okay, so,
Why are you
tell
doing
me more.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me
Well,
more.
my publisher, when the book came out, wanted a spread of coverage. And they told me, and I nearly didn't do it because I thought, do I really want to go down this route? It was a very good writer who'd had to deliberately, change her style for the in-house style of Chat magazine, which is a lot different, very sensational, very. I think it started with something like me going, I looked out of the window and sucked on my cup of tea and thought to myself, oh, work today. It was really like basic sort of stuff. Made me sound a little bit like I'd hit my head. And it sort of wanted to attract people's attention, obviously, hence the I rummage through dead people's drawers,
Yeah. It
which was
did
based,
that.
yeah. And it wasn't, I didn't think, a great thing, but it did get the book towards people who might not have seen it otherwise. So it's a good thing to then get them reading the book. But I think the whole thing was basically the most interesting aspect of the job is the house search. And that's where you find the person. And so that's possibly most people's area of interest. And that's why they hooked onto it for the Chat magazine article. Specifically, I say in the book, I try not to rummage because in my training course, I say to people, don't make it any messier than when you arrived, even if it's messy. Put piles of paper back where you found them. It doesn't want to look like it's been turned upside down, like
Yeah.
burglarized. So target key areas like, the table next to the front door will definitely have the wallet and keys. Even in extreme hoarding houses, there will be little islands of logic, like a desk with a laptop and a pile of papers and post. And yeah, just you go through with three things in mind, looking for a will to get those wishes or an executor, because we cannot cremate where we have reason to believe someone wants to be buried. And that haunts my dreams because reason to believe is so hard to come by in a world where no one talks about death, doesn't write anything down. And
Yes.
when I found someone's daughter once, a couple of weeks before the end of the case, I said, "And what were his wishes?" And she said, "Oh, I think he just said, please don't let them burn me." And I thought, oh, please, he hadn't written that down. I wouldn't have known that. So we go there looking for the wishes, looking for the person, books you're reading, your music collection. I take photos of the CD rack for our celebrant to choose some tunes from,
Nice.
looking for evidence of hobbies, address books for people to call, bits of paper with a phone number on, 1471 if you have a house phone and last numbers dialed, all of this.
Mhm.
We're also we're looking for your paperwork to freeze your bank account to let everyone know you've died.
Mhm.
We're knocking for the neighbours to speak to them. And we've got a public health duty because your food's going off. Your fridge is full of milk that's going to go off even in a fridge because after a while the fridge can only do so much. So we're emptying all the food, we're putting the bins out. We're just doing private detective, house cleaner, and yeah, a little bit of admin for you, a little bit of PA job.
Yeah. Well, this is obviously what's led you to your next book, isn't it? From looking at what you have to find and whether people have or haven't done it, and
Yes.
really how people need to be planning ahead of time. Strangely,
There
what
you
this is
go.
about, planning ahead of time. I got it in there, Evie.
Beautifully done. And it's true. The first book was all about the stories. And then the second book, I thought the things I want people to do, that I need people to do, that we all need people to do, even your next of kin don't necessarily know everything you've signed up for. And so I've got in my own kitchen, I've got a little cupboard with all my papers in folders, but also I've got a notebook on top that says, if you're reading this, I'm dead.
Mm,
And it's just got a list of what I bank with, save with, credit card. You don't need to even spill your passwords if you don't want
no.
to. We just need to know what we've got because they'll accept name, date of birth, and address as a first point of informing, and then a death certificate to close down. If you want to leave account numbers, that's fine because no one can really do much with your, account number of your bank, this apart from donate money to your account, but which would be great. Anyone, it's welcome. But yeah, I
People
just
do worry about that, though. They do worry about leaving the numbers. But,
yeah,
I say just put the last four digits. I mean, if
yes.
you think about it, even with your credit card, we get our statements through and things, and they've hidden them
Excel,
all
yes,
except the last four digits. So if you do that on anything,
you can give them.
then you can find the information. If it's the last four digits of any number, really, you
That's
can
it.
get what people need.
And we really just need a start of a 10. We just need to know who we're ringing and in one nice place because I walk around these houses. There's a bit of a gas bill here, page two. Don't have the front. Yeah, brilliant. No account number. But at least I can phone and know it's British Gas. I can't find an internet bill. I'll have to look under the telly to see if it's a BT box or a Sky box. So it's much easier rather than go on this treasure hunt to try and list it all. I've also asked in my book and in the second book that I've written, I've put the list for you so you can fill it out. At the end of every chapter, it's basically a lesson, a story to show the lesson, and then the activity to fill it out, actually have it in one place. I
Yeah.
want the full name, place of birth, everything because the things the death certificate need. I don't
Mm.
like having an incomplete death certificate. It wants to know marital status. It wants to know occupation while living. And these things sometimes just get completely lost if you're just dealing with friends. Who knows where their friends were born? I had to ask my parents because of doing this job. Sorry, but where were you born? Because I'm
Yeah.
going to need that for the death certificate.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting when you start and actually think you go out with your if you like your closest friends
Mm.
and then name what every one of them does for a job. And
Oh, yeah.
actually, you basically often don't know. You
No, you're
probably
like,
know
chance
half of
it.
them.
No one
Yeah.
knows what he
Yeah.
did.
You think, oh, well, he does something with accounts. Well,
Oh,
that can be a lot of things with accounts. Or,
yeah,
I know that yeah, they help
actually.
people or they work somewhere in the NHS. Well, the NHS is a
Yeah.
big organization,
Yeah.
exactly what do you mean? So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
it.
some contact numbers for those people as well, for those friends, because the coroner, if it's an unexpected death, will only really look for the next of kin.
Mm,
So someone who's like a live-in, not a live-in partner, like a boyfriend, girlfriend who lives away, or your best friends, they might not find out for a while if things go a bit too slowly and things don't progress quickly enough. So anyone who you want to be informed, and we look for these things, and the police look for these things, were they to kick the door down after having a welfare call? And they will look for your phone if it's near you and try and see if it's unlocked. They will look for an address book and try and make some rudimentary calls. The coroner will too. Before it comes to me, they'll have had a go. So if you've got that sort of phone number list, that's gold. That's like brilliant. We can get your people straight to you.
mm,
So yeah, and there's lots of different chapters based on wills, wishes, funeral planning, even with the funeral tick list with all of the possible permutations you can want and ideas for things you didn't know you could have. Digital death, death cleaning,
yeah.
pre-death, advanced care planning. And at the
So
end,
important.
yeah, and
So important.
oh my God, people don't do it at all. They don't even
No.
think. I didn't, I'm so death adjacent, but I only started thinking about it when I went on Claire Fuller's planning podcast and she asked me what I'd done. And I was like,
Oops.
nothing. But I've done it now. I've done it with her,
Yes.
and I do a whole
Brilliant.
chapter about that. But at the end, there's a handy bit for the person who finds the book, the future dead, beyond the person who's dead in the book, the person next. And it's got
Yes.
all my hacks for closing down a life, registration, medical examiners now involved, and all of the things you need to know, and all of the sadmin tips. So that hopefully
Yeah.
it's holistic, how to close down a life and how to make sure your life gets closed down properly.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of sadmin to do, isn't there?
There is.
I actually like that. I like the term close down a life. I think it's actually a really lovely way of putting it because it is what you're doing. I mean, I look at it as we transition,
Yes.
but I do think, yeah, you are closing down this physical life.
The admin side,
Yeah,
yeah, the
yeah,
boring bit.
absolutely true. Do you have a name for the book? Have you any idea when it's coming out?
At the moment, the working title is Sort Your Life Out with Life Crossed Through, but I don't think that would be the title. I think I might even mirror the title of Ashes to Admin with Sadmin to Gladmin or even Radmin. But we'll see. And we're hoping for like 2026 to go in hand with some other stuff that's happening. But I'm hoping sooner, really, because I want people to get on this right now. I want people to be organized yesterday. So
Yeah.
the draft's ready and I've got interest to buy it from a big publisher. So I think hopefully soon.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, that's good because yes, everybody should have done it yesterday. It makes a huge difference when people have planned, when they've got their affairs in order, when their family know about it, when the whatever the relative, whoever their person is, knows what they've got to do. I mean,
Greatest
it,
gift
it
you can
just
get.
it's a game changer, and I think it takes so much of the stress away. And as somebody who does work from the sort of the bridging the gap between the physical and spiritual side, you know, it is nice when people come to see me and they're not worried about did or didn't they do the right thing, and because it actually helps alleviate a lot of grief as well, actually knowing that they've done right by somebody. So it makes a big difference to plan.
It really does.
Okay. Well, Evie, it's been really interesting. I have to admit, I think I could just sit and talk to you all night, but we've not got the time. So if people would like to find out more about you, what you're doing, what you've written, how do they do that?
I'm not active on Twitter anymore, but I am there at Evie King Writes, and there's a link tree there with all of the things, the Instagram and where I am on Blue Sky and things like that. And I can be reached on private message on any of those. But if anyone wants to drop me an email, it's eviekingwrites@yahoo.com. And I'm happy to take any questions or anything wants to ask me.
Okay, well, it's lovely. It's been really great to speak with you. Thank you very much for doing a pat chat with me.
Thank you.